All right, my name is Howard Eber and I am an addict. Welcome, everybody, back to the final part of the Window of Opportunity workshop, taking the critical newcomer through the steps in 2 days. Where we left off last week was we finished basically steps 1 and 2, and I want to start at step 3 today and get through 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, hopefully even 8 and 9. Just sorry, turning on a light there. Uh, if you've got the workbook, I'm going to ask that you. Well, actually, let's turn to page 62 in our book, in the actual big book. See, we're about to go into looking at our thoughts. We said that there's no way that we can really treat the first part of our ailment, the spiritual. I'm sorry, the physical allergy, but we can change the thinking that leads us to the obsession that starts with our being spiritually in the spiritual malady of being restless and irritable, discontented, just miserable. Um, and the thoughts that run through our heads at that point that cause us to think, gee, maybe this time it'll be different. So we're going to look at our thoughts. And in order to do that, it's helpful to kind of figure out why. So let's take a look at page 62, paragraph 1, beginning with selfishness, self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. I'm going to suggest you highlight that whole paragraph and the next paragraph. Keep it simple. Let's do it all right now. And I want you to notice, as a side note, how many times the word self appears on this page. We're not going to be counting them all because we didn't start enough early enough, but it's repeated over and over and over again to put across the point that self is the problem. Selfishness, self centeredness, we already got two. First two words, we got two. That we think is, not was, is the root of our troubles. And again, the root is the part of the plant, of the tree that gives it life, that supports it. I'm sorry, there's a light on here that's annoying me. Okay, that's better. It's the part of the plant that supports it. So if the root gives life to the plant, then if the plant is thought of as our disease, what feeds, what keeps alive our disease are these thoughts of self. And we're going to see what they look like. We don't know what they are yet. We just know they're thoughts of self. And he says, driven. If I'm being driven, then I have absolutely no say in what goes on here at all. And he says, driven by 100 forms of fear. I'm not in charge. I'm being driven by 100 forms of fear, self delusion, self seeking, self pity. We step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. So we take action based on these thoughts of self, whatever they look like, and we'll get to that. And what happens? We're in conflict spiritually, mentally, physically. And when we're in conflict, we will eventually collide. We will run smack into those forces with which we are in conflict. And when we run into those forces and step on their toes, what do? Well, if I'm going to step on your toe, you're going to get off my foot. You're going to retaliate. You're going to push back. So, driven by these thoughts of self, I run into you, you push back and retaliate. And what do? I retaliate. I get angry. I get fearful. I act in a harmful manner. So, we're starting to identify what those thoughts are of anger, of fear, of causing harm to others. I can't think of a single problem, emotional difficulty I've ever had they didn't have to do with one of those three things that I'm angry as hell about something, scared to death about something, or I've done something that I'm afraid you're going to find out about, and it's causing me enormous guilt and shame. So if the thought leads to that action of being resentful, resentful to me means I will drink and I will drug, because my history has shown me that resentments make me drink and drug. So if the action of drinking and drugging is what I want to eliminate, I have to go back to those thoughts that set in motion this chain of events. Set me in motion to be in conflict, step on toes, retaliate, retaliate. I get fearful, angry, and resentful, and I use. So let's continue with what Bill says. Driven, and here's an interesting way to look at this. Driven. Mark Houston has a great analogy for this. He says, I come down from my hotel in the morning and there's a limousine out front of the hotel. And the driver gets out of the car and he comes around and he opens up the door and he says, Mr. Houston, my name is Fear, and I'm going to be driving you around all day today. So he gets in the car and Fear drives him everywhere he goes. It's Fear, Fear, Fear. Drops him off at the hotel at night. The next morning, another chauffeur drives up, comes around the car, opens the door, and said, "Hello, Mr. Houston. My name is Self Delusion. I'm going to be driving you around today." And they do that all day long. And I think you get the point without my having to go through all of these. That's what it's like, is to be driven by something, is to just get in the back and I'm taking you around. That's it. Uh, so we step on the toes and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us seemingly without provocation, without any reason. But we invariably, and please underline this, we invariably find at some time in the past, we made decisions based on self that placed us in a position to be hurt. We made a decision based on self. We don't know what they look like yet, but we make a decision based on self that puts us in conflict. Conflict leads to stepping on toes and so on. So, and please underline and put asterisks before and after this sentence. So, our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. The only spiritual axiom we have in recovery, and you'll find it on page 90 in the 12 and 12, is this dictum, if you will, that if there is a problem, the chances are it's me. As my friend Bill Cleveland likes to say, oh my God, it's me. Okay. But if you look at page 90, it says this, it is a spiritual maxim. I'm sorry, page 90 to 12 and 12. It's a spiritual axiom that every time we're disturbed, no matter what the cause, there's something wrong with us. Like I said, oh my God, it's me. Okay, they arise out of ourselves. Catch how many selves we see here? Self, self, self. And the alcohol is an extreme example. Please underline that, an extreme example of self will run riot. Self will run riot. What does that look like? I make a decision based on self that puts me in collision with you. Self will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. Must, you may want to circle in green. We always highlight the musts. For everyone who says there are no musts in this book, as Paige likes to say, it's a very musty book. So we're going to highlight all of the greens. We're going to musts by circling them in green. And a lot of times they take other forms. Doesn't just appear as must, had to, required, essential. There's a lot of different words that Bill uses, all mean the same thing, must. We must be rid of the selfishness. We must, or it kills us. That's a stern warning. God makes that possible. And there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Many of us had moral and philosophical convictions galore. Moral just means we have a sense of right and wrong. I think we do. I know I had a set of morals when I wasn't drinking and drugging, and I tried to live up to them. I had a conscience when I wasn't drinking and drugging, but when I was, watch out. All bets are off. I can do anything when I'm under the influence. My morals go right out the window. So I have a set of morals and I have a philosophical conviction. And in this case, the philosophical conviction refers to the knowledge I have gained through experience about the cause of things, basically the cause and effect of certain things. I have an idea of that. I do something, this is what's going to happen. Yet when I'm under the influence, I know what's going to happen and I still do it. So that's a combination of moral and philosophical convictions. But we couldn't live up to them even if we would like to. Neither could we reduce our self centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. Underline, please, own power. We had to, that's a must. We had to, is circled in green, have God's help. This is the how and the why of it. And please, I don't know if I mentioned it, but we're going to highlight this paragraph as well. This is the how and the why of it. Please underline how and underline why. And here's a great example of Bill's his genius, his simplicity, because he could go on for 10, 20 pages on how and then another 10, 20 pages on why. But he doesn't do that. Watch what he does. It's so incredible. It just blows me away. That's the how and why of it. First of all, we had to, there's a green circle, we had to quit playing God. Above that, please write the word how. Here's how. Stop playing God. End. I don't need 20 more pages. Stop playing God. It didn't work. Please underline it didn't work. Above it, write why. So we have to stop playing God. Why? Because we're not. You're not God. You may think so. I certainly thought so for a while there. But the fact is, the philosophical conviction is that I'm not. So there's the why of it. How? Stop doing that. Why? You ain't it. Does it get any easier than that? Next, what do you do when you're in the bank and the person behind the counter, the teller says, next? We step up. We get up there and we do our business. So next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our directors. Please circle that word director. He's the principal. Let's circle principal, and we are his agents. An agent is someone who works for the client. In this case, the client is God. He doesn't work for me. God is not my errand boy. I am here to do his bidding. How do I know that? I could read. Watch. He's the principal, we're his agents. He's the father. Please circle father. And we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of a new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. This next paragraph, please highlight entirely in pink. This is a paragraph that's referred to as the step 3 promises. And I think that may be a bit of a misnomer, because really what it is it tells me of the promises that happen as a result of what we just read. And we didn't read the third step yet. We haven't taken that third step. What we read was the how and the why of it. And we learned that God is the director. God is the principal, God is the Father. So please, as we read this paragraph, keep that in mind. God is the principal, He's the director, He's the Father. When we sincerely took such a position, He's the director, He's the Father, all sorts of remarkable things followed. Remarkable things, exemplary things. We had a new employer. Let's underline that. We had a new employer. Now, when you go to work at a new job, what's one of the first things you do? You get a job description. Hi, I'm the boss. Here's what you have to do. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed, not what we wanted, what we needed. If, big if, let's circle that. That's the condition here. He'll give us what we need, not what we want. God isn't the least bit concerned with what Howard Eber wants. He's going to give me what I need. The hell with my wants. So he's going to provide what I needed if, and here's my job description. Please underline, if I kept close to him and performed his work well. Now, at one of the recent workshops, somebody suggested that the word perform should be circled in green, that it's actually a must. So I leave that up to you. If you feel it's a must, there's certainly something to be said for that, but I don't want to get too bogged down in something like that right now. So if you feel it's a must, circle it in green. Performed his work well. There's the key word, his work well. For 24 years in recovery, I had a very dis a very confused relationship with God. I thought He was here to do my bidding. I began each day by saying, God, this is what I need to do, giving Him a list of assignments. At the end of the day, I had my list because I always keep my lists, and I went down the list and stuff didn't get done. So, what's up, God? Well, maybe we'll try again tomorrow. Okay. That's what I thought because that's what I was told every morning. Say this third step prayer we're about to say and tell God what you need Him to do. That's what I was told as instructions. Whoever told me that didn't read this book. If he read the book, he'd have told me to ask what I should do, not tell God what I must do, what he must do. So perform his work well, established on such a footing. Again, the footing being he's the principal, he's the father. We became less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. Please underline contribute. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, not restless, irritable discontent, as we enjoyed that peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully. Please underline, okay, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. So we look at these thoughts because they are the guiding light of our problems. They feed our ism. If it's the root of my problem, it feeds my ism, my disease. So it says, the book says, we are now at step 3. And if you've got your study guide, I'm on page 13. And now I'm going to share the screen. Page 13. Um, and there's a couple of different versions of this going around. So this is what it looks like. Forget about what the page number is. In my book, it's obviously page 13, but it is the third step prayer. Simply, we're now at step 3. Many of us said, and I'm going to ask that you all follow with me. In fact, let's unmute everyone. Would you mind doing that, Emily? Unmute everyone and let's take the third step prayer together. God, I offer myself to thee to build with
and to do it me as thou wilt. Leave me a lady of the bondage of self,
Of the
now that I
bondage
can
of
be thy.
submit better to your will.
victory
We
over
will
them.
do
May bear witness to those who would help thy
Help
power,
me
thy
power
love,
and thy love,
may
now
you do
we
thy will,
find
Lord.
in the Lord. Amen.
Notice there is no amen after that prayer. We are
Sorry.
third step prayer here, and then we're being given 13 pages of direction. And then we have the seventh step prayer that ends with not only the word amen, because amen means so be it. It indicates the end of one thing and the beginning of another. But it also says that we have now completed step 7. So, in a sense, we are starting step 7 here by making this third step declaration that God is going to be my teacher, and we're going to ask that He relieve us of our difficulties and show that victory over them witnesses, shows His power, His love, and His way of life. And the next 13 pages tells us how that happens. So we're going to go from there into our inventory. And I'm going to ask that let's turn the page on this back to the share. All right. Step 4. Please turn to 63 in your book. Oh, we're on 63. I'm sorry. Let's just go down to the bottom of the page that we're on. We just finished the third step prayer in the middle of the page, and now we're going to the bottom of the page. Next, we launched on a course of vigorous action. That vigorous action is steps 4 through 9. Not just step 4, steps 4 through 9. The first step of which is a personal housekeeping. Now we're talking about step 4, which many of us had never attempted. Though our decision, please highlight the rest of this paragraph, please. Though our decision, please underline decision, above it, write step 3. Though our third step decision was, watch this, a vital and crucial step. Please underline those two words, vital and crucial. Vital is defined as something that is life-supporting. My heart is a life-supporting organ. I cannot live without it. And crucial is defined as essential. So both of these words actually can be taken as musts, but they all both mean the same thing. Basically, Bill is saying the third step was a life-supporting step. Must be important, okay? So he's telling us it would have little permanent. Please underline that word, permanent. Permanent sobriety is the end result of doing this work. We can achieve permanent sobriety, and we're promised that all through the book. Here's another reference to it. Yes, it is a day at a time program, but we can achieve permanent sobriety by living one day at a time in the spiritual disciplines of 10, 11, and 12, and we'll get there. So it will have little permanent effect unless, and please double underline these words, at once follow. Not 30 days later, not even 30 minutes later. We just took our third step. We immediately begin the fourth step. And here's why. Followed by a strenuous effort to face and be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. I'm sorry, we already said why. That if we don't do it, it won't have any effect. We'll have little effect. So we had to as a must, causes and conditions. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. Please jump to the bottom of the page. The last paragraph that begins with resentment is the number one offender. Let's underline resentment and let's define our terms. Resentment is something that we means to do again. RE means to repeat. Sentiment comes from the Latin word sentire, which means to feel. So what we are going to be doing is refeeling these angers, these fears, these sources of guilt and shame. So the whole fourth step process technically is a resentment list. Even though most meetings, if the topic is resentment, people talk about angers. And that's probably because Bill uses them interchangeably in this book. But technically, anger is a resentment, just like fear is a resentment. And the harms we've done are resentments. But resentment, refeeling these things is the number one offender. It destroys more alcoholics than anything else. Please highlight, for we have been not only mentally and physically ill, we have been spiritually sick. Above mentally, please write obsession. Above physically, let's write uh, craving, allergy. I'm sorry, allergy. We have been spiritually sick. And above that, right, spiritual malady, obviously. So it mentions the three dimensions that we're sick in. And then this next sentence is a promise. We like to highlight promises in pink. So we're going to highlight this in pink if you've got it. But it's a promise. It tells us we're sick in these three dimensions. And then it tells us when this spiritual malady is overcome, we straighten out mentally and physically. Please underline spiritual malady, underline mentally, underline physically. When the spiritual malady is overcome, how is that overcome? Above spiritual malady, please write steps 1, 2, 3. I get right, I get in harmony with God in steps 1, 2, and 3. I get right the natural order of things. Namely, I am here to do his bidding. I'm not here to give him or her orders. And I establish that chain of command, if you will, by working the first, second, and third steps. And when I do that, what happens? We then overcome mentally, and above mentally, right, steps 4 through 7. I get right up here. I get right with myself in steps 4, 5, 6, and 7. And when I'm right spiritually and then mentally, I get right physically. And above physically right, steps 8 and 9, because we're talking about the physical world, which is our bodies and interaction with everybody else's body in the world. That's what we mean by physical. We're not just talking about our body. We're talking about how our body integrates with every other body. We straighten out mentally and physically. And here is the assignment. Please write this down. In dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. We listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. Please notice it doesn't say with whom we are angry. It says with whom we were angry. So that's telling me anything that occurs to me in terms of my anger, I put down. I don't rationalize, well, I've dealt with that. It's in the past, when Billy Cutner kicked sand in my face in the sandbox when we were both 3 years old, I'm not going to put that down. Yeah, put it down because it occurred to you. If it occurs to you, put it down, because as we just read, we are trying to get down to causes and conditions. We want to know what made us get angry. So we want to understand our angers. We look at all of them, whether we still feel it or not, we're going to refeel it now. So there's the assignment. Make a list of people, institutions, and principles with whom we were angry. And on the worksheet that I've given you here, I've kind of provided some ideas. Let me blow it up. It's hard to see it this small. Uh, I never met an addict who didn't know exactly who he was angry at. That's an easy one. Institutions, I don't think that's that hard either. We're angry at a government, a government agency, the police department, the mental health system, the any given religion or all religion. Uh, how about step study workshops? That's an institution that pisses people off. It pissed me off when I first walked into it. Even though I wanted to do it, it was still, my God, there's a lot of work here. Yeah, there is. Okay. But principles requires a little bit more thought, because principles, in a way, are some of the things that are drilled into our heads as we're growing up. You see, down at the bottom of this list, it says old sayings. Let me blow this up. Oops. See, down the last item in the principles list says old sayings. That's what we're talking about. Some of the things that are drilled into our head as we grow up that cause us pain. Give you an example. One of my guys put down the principle of all men are created equal. He's black. That wasn't his truth at all. And every time he heard it, it made him angry. It caused him conflict. It caused him confusion, because that wasn't his reality. That was someone else's truth, not his. So we put down those kind of things. My parents raised me with the principle of never striking another human being in anger. Never raise your hand to harm another human being. I believe in that. I raised my son that way. But you see, when I was a kid, I was always the shortest kid. I was chubby little kid. I had glasses and braces in the second grade. I got picked on, and I never fought back because my parents didn't want me to. And while I felt I was doing the right thing, I was filled with conflict and confusion because I also felt like a coward. So I put down on the list that theory, never strike that principle, never strike another human being in anger. Everybody has these things. We're told by our parents, real men do this or don't do this. Real ladies do this or don't do this. That's what we're talking about. So if we're going to be doing this together, I'm going to ask that you turn this page over, and on the back of the page, make a list of those things. Just make a list of those things. I'm going to go get a cup of tea or glass of water or something, and I'm going to come back in a couple of minutes. Low hanging fruit, just what occurs to you, Mr. Prospect, Mrs. Prospect. In the time we're sitting here, what comes to mind? Put it down. And when we come back, I'm going to ask that you now, let me blow this up a bit so we could see it again. Turn the page over, the next page over, and on the back of the page, draw these 4 columns. Columns 1, 2, 3, and 4. Just draw it on the back of the page. And if you should have a notebook, great, all the better. If you have a notebook, open it up, designate a page, and go across it 1, 2, 3, and 4. And what do we put there? Well, let's go back to the grid that I'm giving you here. In column 1, you have your list of names. You just wrote it down. So take one of them off the top of the list, put it down on that piece of paper, the back of this page. In the left-hand corner, write, I am resentful at. Write the name down in that corner. The next column, Bill tells us, we asked why we were angry. Why does this person deserve a special place in hell? Why am I angry at this SOB? We bullet points, just brief words. This person molested me. This person robbed me. This person did that. Just bullet points. We don't need the whole story now. And now the third column, the beauty of the third and the fourth column, guys, is it's multiple choice. You don't have to do any thinking, but look at this list of words in each column and ask, does it fit or not? Because we're looking for now in column 3, what basic instinct was hurt or threatened by what that person, column 1, did to us, column 2. I can't be angry at you unless you do something that hurts or threatens one of my basic instincts. And what are basic instincts? They're God given survival mechanisms. We need them to exist, to survive in life. We need our sense of self esteem, our sense of pride. We need our security instinct. And while Bill uses the word security, there are 3 parts of security. There's emotional security, which is a general sense of well-being. There's financial security, the US pocketbook or the European pocketbook. And there's physical security, my body. I want to start moving a little faster here. So which and my ambitions, my ability to accomplish tasks, and my relationship instincts, which has 2 facets. My relationship, personal relationships, people I work with, people I live near, family members, people I have a personal relationship with. And then there's people I have a sexual relationship with. So those are sex relations. This person in column 1 made me angry because he did this in column 2, and it affects my basic instinct of ambition, of physical security, and so on. Which of those things fit? And I made it easier. I defined some of those terms at the bottom of this column. Self-esteem is how I feel about me. Pride is how you feel about me, how I think you feel about me. Emotional security is a general sense of well-being, and ambition, your ability to accomplish tasks. I want to go to a family wedding, but my cousin is going to be there and I can't stand this bastard, so I don't go. My anger towards him has affected my ambition, my ability to accomplish a simple task of going to a family wedding. That's ambition. And then column 3, what mistake did I make? Now, this may require sometimes looking back at column 2, because when we're describing what that person did to us, let's say they molested us, okay? What basic instinct of theirs was hurt or out of whack? I mean, sorry, which defect in this last column compelled them to do that? Were they frightened? Were they irresponsible? Were they inconsiderate? Well, now I'm going to look and ask myself, was I ever like that? Was I ever frightened? Was I inconsiderate, irresponsible, and so on in relation to this anger as well as in general? So I'm going to ask myself, was I frightened or irresponsible in my reaction to this person? Was I ever frightened or irresponsible? Put those words down. And what I'm going to ask that you do is, as you do column 3 and column 4, whatever the first one is that occurs to you, circle that in that column. So in column 3, you'll have a list of basic instincts, one of which is circled. And in column 4, you have these defects of character, these manifestations of self. Now we know what they look like. We are frightened, we are irresponsible, inconsiderate, dishonest, selfish, self-seeking, judgmental. Those are words that Bill used in this book and in the 12 and 12. Nothing is created here. This is exactly what Bill has written. So what defect of character in the 5th column was in the 4th column was my mistake? So what I'm going to do, and incidentally, self-seeking is a particular form of selfishness where I do something deliberately to hurt you so I feel better about myself. I do something that makes you feel like crap or look like crap so I could feel better about myself. It's an ugly habit. It's a terrible habit, but I had a tendency to do that. So that's what self-seeking is to me, why it's different than just being selfish. So I'm going to go get another cup of tea. I'm going to go to the bathroom. I'm going to make a phone call, and I'm going to ask that you start this list on the back of the page. Let me take this down for a minute. On the back of the page that we're talking about, I'm going to ask that you write it out. Column 1, the person. Column 2, what they did. Column 3, what basic instinct, and circle the one that comes first to mind. And then what defect of character. And please circle the one that came to mind first. And I'll be back in a few seconds. And when I come back, what we do is we sit down and go across these columns. Tell me what you have written. And as we go across, and somebody says, say in the fourth column, they say I was irresponsible or inconsiderate. And I hear that, and I think, no, you were outright dishonest. That wasn't being inconsiderate or irresponsible. It was being dishonest. So let's replace, don't you think that? Now, again, the point of doing this with someone who's done it before is that type of scenario, is we could see things. A solitary self-appraisal is insufficient because individually we can't see the truth about ourselves because of a lifetime of rationalization and justification. So a third party, a second party, whatever, doesn't have that. There's nothing between me and that person but air. They can see my defects. I can't. So that person may see, I think it's dishonest, not irresponsible or inconsiderate. What do you think? I don't make any decisions for them. I make suggestions. And if they see that that's valid or has some value, they do it, put it down. So that's what we're going to do the fourth angers list right away. We're going to start with that. And the next thing we're going to do, if you turn to page 68, is we're going to do our fears list. And on the top of page 68, paragraph 1, it gives us our directions. I know there's some people who do the fears list as a list in grid form. Okay, it doesn't tell me to do that in the book. So I'm going to go by what the book tells me to do. And here's what the book says, page 68, paragraph 1. Here's the first assignment. We reviewed our fears thoroughly. We put them on paper. So that means I'm going to suggest you take the page, any page from the book that you have, turn it on the back, and write the following. I am afraid of blank. Write down what you're afraid of. And one of the things I like to give out, let me get this up here, is a little simple grid. I'm sorry, not a grid, a prompt list. Just ideas, fear, let's blow it up a bit. And let me just take one, for example, fear of confrontation. Now that to me, it means two things. Confrontation could be, as an employer, I have to straighten out an employee, or as a parent, I have to discipline a child. That's confrontation. A neighbor who makes noise, I got to knock on his door and say, hey, could you turn it down a bit? It's 3 a.m. That's one type of confrontation. Another type of confrontation is when I go out the door to go to work in the morning. Before I go out, I look and see if any of my neighbors are on their way out at the same time. And I won't go out because I don't want to interact with them. I don't want to confront another human being, even if it's just, hey, Joe Flimmelgates, have a good day. How's the wife? How's the family? Please don't have your dog shit on my lawn again today. Whatever. I don't want to have an interaction with another human being. Fear of confrontation, fear of intimacy, fear of being late. As you get older, fear of cancer, fear of dying, fear of all of these things set in. Fear of wealthy people, fear of poor people, Fear of dentists, clowns, and spiders. I think we all have that one, right? We're all afraid of dentists, clowns, and spiders. Put it down. We're looking for irrational fears. Rational fears are truths. They protect us. A fear of dentists, normal, because they drill into your teeth. It's painful. But if your fear of dentists has kept you from ever going to see one, then it's become an irrational fear. But let's get back to the book because it's giving us directions. The first thing on page 868, it says we listed our fears. I'm sorry, it says we reviewed our fears and put them on paper. So I am afraid of, I am afraid of, I am afraid of. And then in paragraph 2, the next thing it says to do on page, I'm sorry, not in paragraph 2, assignment 2 on page 68, paragraph 1, the third line down. We asked ourselves why we had them. Underline that, and above it, number 2, there's the number 2 assignment, why we had them. And the beauty of this is Bill gives us the answer. Here's why we had them. Wasn't it because self-reliance failed us? I'm reading from 68:1. Self-reliance was good as far as it went, but it didn't go far enough. Some of us once had great self-confidence, but it didn't fully solve the fear problem or any other. When it made us cocky, it was worse. So in the next paragraph, it says, we're now on a different basis, the basis of trusting and relying upon God. And here's the key, this third line in that paragraph, we trust infinite God rather than finite selves. There it is. That's why we had our fears, because we relied on self, and self-reliance failed us. So that if we rely on something that's infinite, God's powers are infinite, then we will get what we want by asking Him to give it to us. So we must first ask. And that's the third part of the assignment. In the next paragraph, 68:3, it ends with 4 lines up from the bottom of that paragraph. We ask Him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what He would have us be. And what God would have us be is always courageous. Courageous. I'm afraid of answering this phone. Grant me the courage to answer that call. I'm afraid of asking this girl out on a date. God, give me the courage to ask her out on a date. And then I have to exercise my willpower to do that. I ask God to help me overcome my fear of whatever it is, direct my attention to what He would have us be, which is courageous. And then I ask God's help and I apply my willpower. And then I act in that courageous manner. And here's what happens. I commence to outgrow fear. Doesn't mean I'm free of it. I begin. Commence means to begin something, to begin a process. Outgrowing fear, that is a process. Outgrowing something means you're growing, you're changing. We are changing the way we view fear. That's what begins here. By the time we get to the 7th step, we'll be applying that same logic to all of our defects of character. So I'm going to ask that you do that fear list. I'm going to go get another cup of tea and come back, and we're going to start our sex harms. And the way we discern who goes on this list, I'm going to ask that you take your notebook or blank piece of paper and make 5 columns. And what we do in those columns, we are not listing all the people we ever had sexual relations with. In fact, some people may even not have had sex. We may not have had sex relations, but our sex relations harmed them. You had an affair with your next door neighbor who happened to be married. So that person's husband, wife, children, dog goes on that list because your sexual conduct hurt that person. So we're going to put in column 1, who did I hurt? Column 2, what did I do? What was it we're talking about here? Bullet points. Column 3, once again, basic instinct. What basic instinct was hurt or threatened by what I did? I felt I had this relationship because I wanted to boast about it, to show off. It wasn't, and here's the other criteria. The first criteria is, was it selfish or not? Second criteria, was it for reasons of reproduction or mutual pleasure? Because God give us these God-given powers, these sexual powers, and he gives it to us to procreate, to reproduce, and because it's so much fun, he makes it an enjoyable experience. So we will do it. So we put in column 1 the ones that we are motivated by self-esteem, by pride, by emotional security. I'm weak. I need somebody in my life. So I engage in a sexual relationship that I don't like, that I don't want, but I want the security of another person in my life. Maybe I'm doing it for financial reasons. Maybe I'm doing it for physical reasons. I'm afraid of being beat up if I don't do it. Ambitions, which are controls. Personal relations. I'm doing it because I want to have a better relationship with somebody. I'm lonely. I need somebody. I want to have that relationship. I don't want to do this activity. So I engage in it, and it affects my emotional security, my personal relations, maybe even my physical security. And then we're asked, turn the corner and look at it from a different angle. How did that person feel? Did I unjustifiably arouse any of these things? Jealousy, suspicion, anger. If you can't, and I'm not asking you to know exactly what they felt. You didn't have to ask them. Don't go off on a mission asking these people, you remember that relationship we had 40 years ago? How did it make you feel? No. Put yourself in their position. How would you feel if that happened to you? That's what we're asking. So if that happened to you, would you feel jealous? Would you feel anger? Would you feel bitter? Would you feel confused? Various things. And then column 5, once again, what defect was the mistake that I made? I was acting frightened. I was doing it because I was inconsiderate. I was irresponsible, and so on. That's the money column. This 5th column, this last column, this is where the defects of character in step 6 are going to come from, and the shortcomings in step 7 are going to come from, all out of this column. So I would go have another cup of coffee or something, and by now I'm going to have to go to the bathroom again. So I'll go to the bathroom, I'll come back, and we'll go across your columns. You see, we're doing step 5 at the same time we're doing step 4. And because we're running out of time, I'm going to stop at that point. You all have the workbook. You could see if you follow the directions, they're going through 6, 7, 8, and 9. And the one thing I will mention is when we go through 8 and 9, we form this list of people we have harmed and when we're going to make the amends. Now, later, maybe, never. We have to make a list of everyone we've harmed. So we make that list. And once we come back, you'll call somebody. You'll make the amends right here, right now. We may even do a few of them. And from this point on with the prospect, the deal is you do one a day until that whole list is finished. And that's how we do the 8th and 9th step when we are sitting for a couple of hours. It can be done. Remember, the point of this is get some kind of inventory, some kind of amends going, some kind of generation of spiritual enlightenment. And then, with an enlightened spirit, a somewhat, even if it's a flicker, a somewhat enlightened spirit, we can then go back to the beginning of the book and do this word for word, line by line, the way that we always talk about doing it. But right now, we're triaging. We got to patch up that guy, stop the bleeding, and then we'll do it the other way. Thank you for having me.